serve other people. Khairun nas anfa'uhum linnas, and the best people are those people that benefit other people. But most important, the Rasul came with values, and the values of truthfulness, values of integrity, values of humility, of shukr, of gratitude, and those are the values that we must look for in the people that we want to lead us. One of the saddest things in the world is, I think Martin Luther King identified the triple evils, and those triple evils would be war, racism, and poverty. And war has different iterations and different categories. Many wars have become what we call genocides and holocausts. And there's, interestingly, an Australian Jewish professor. In 2020, he put together many of his thoughts. His last name is Polya, Maxwell, I think, or Maxwell Polya. And Maxwell Polya actually traced the killings and the genocides from the year 1950, that is even after the Second World War and the First World War, till the current, which is about 70 years. And he found that 1.3 billion people were killed, were slaughtered. 100 million of them were Europeans, and 1.2 billion of them were non-Europeans. Now we know in the Congo alone, 12 million people were murdered just because they have so many amazing minerals that everyone needs. The minerals we need for our cell phones and so on. But we may not agree with the calculations that it comes up with, but he believes that 600 million Muslims were slaughtered during this period. 600 million Muslims. Because most of the time the numbers are understated. So it'd be very interesting to get hold of this book where he speaks about the Muslim Holocaust and the Muslim genocides. And then unfortunately, when we look at many Muslims, even some of our ai that are popular, and when we speak about tragedy, we make the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, to be the ultimate tragedy, the ultimate pain. And yet there are other communities that had 600 million if you look at the global ummah of the Muslims, and it's just counting, and it's just continuing. So it's important for us to recognize the extent of the pain, recognize the extent of the damage. When it came to this voting issue, I found it extremely difficult to, when I looked at the war and the Holocaust and the genocides, and I said it's impossible for me to go even with either of these candidates. Both of them are pro-controlled puppets of the Zionists, and just hope the little inshallah that the one of them said, or getting a few Muslims, won't fool Muslims, and they will still have the right to defend Palestine and the right to defend Muslim causes. That's very unfortunate. So we have to look at those triple evils. Look at racism. Racism has a different form different manifestation in the form of Islamophobia. It's a form of racism. What happened in New Zealand, what happened everywhere else, and it's continuously happening. So we have to look at different forms of racism, because the vast majority of Muslims are people of color. And so that type of Islamophobia, form of racism that is institutionalized, it become an industry, and it's also intersectional. And then poverty. Of course, we have to always care, because the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was always a champion for the poor. And he always prayed, Allah mahshurni fi zumratil masakin. Let me be resurrected with a group of poor people. What is very sad is most of the world and the things that are happening in the world is being controlled by the 1%, or what can actually say the 0.001%. And unfortunately, everyone is just following like sheep. And we have powerful groups where there's the tech companies in Silicon Valley. There's another Silicon Valley, there's twice more cutting edge, and that is in Israel. Most of the decisions are made there. Most of the things are happening from there. And so we need to be aware of how things are operating in this world, how Google has become sometimes a Gestapo in the way they censor things and the way they do other things. But then why should we vote? If we feel that even some of the candidates we have a choice between a bad wolf in wolf clothing and a bad wolf in sheep clothing. Is that really a choice? It is important to vote because many times on the ballot you may have 40 or even 50 persons, and you need to do your research. Even a little position like the treasurer of Oakland County or treasurer of a certain county, that person is sitting with an operational budget of more than $1 billion. A city like Troy has an operational budget alone of $1 billion. So how do they distribute those funds? If you have a voting in a certain congressperson or a senator, and they are going to sit on committees that decide on what happens in Myanmar, what happens in Xinjiang with the Chinese or Kashmir, then you are actually impacting that. If you are voting in a judge, a Muslim judge, for instance, sometimes a single judge like the judge of Hawaii could overturn the Muslim ban. And so for Muslims to be strategic, Malcolm X in 1964, I think, at Oxford Union, or 1960, in Oxford, he spoke about 26 committees, and he said we must put people on each of those committees because they control the world. So it is still important to vote. In Oregon, they had a proposal to vote the legalization of cocaine, and that passed. Now, you have in Michigan, we had the proposal to protect our digital privacy. There's no unwarranted seizures of our digital data. That, fortunately, people voted that they still want that digital privacy. So voting is extremely interesting. And even though you don't agree with whoever's going to be chosen as president, you have so many others to vote on. You may be voting in someone as a regent of a university, and you know that person is not going to be interested in having halal on campuses or having very robust Islamic programs. So those are the people also that you are voting in. So there were one or few imams in Atlanta and other places said voting is haram. But I think if we really study and see who we are impacting, we are not just voting a president, but we are voting on so many issues, and it's extremely important to be part of the process. There's a piece of information that came out that 35% Muslims voted for Trump, 65% voted for Biden, whatever the case may be. What people didn't see is, as they are putting down the statistics, they say the Muslims are less than 1% of the US population. That itself, that subliminal message that we are actually just over 2 million Muslims in this country, that itself is the evil. Because we have at least 12 to 15 million. And you do the math then, and you see where the message about what percentage shows the one way or the other was less important than the other subliminal messages that are out there. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always give us insights. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a mindset that is quite different. There are two books. I'm not sure if I mentioned one last week in the 2 o'clock Khutba. But the other one is by Anand Giridharadas, Winners Take All. It's an important book to read. There's also another book, Outlier. And the Outlier book is actually about a type of thinking, the thinking of the poor people, and the thinking of the wealthy. The poor people teach their children to obey every rule and to obey every authority and just go along with everything that is being served to them. The wealthy mentality is to challenge everything. You go to a dentist, not to just go sit quietly, but to ask them, now what's happening to my mouth, and what can I do, and are you doing this correctly? Another dentist says this. the wealthy mentality teaches their children constantly to challenge constantly. And I think the outlier book will be useful. And for some of you who have extra time, even you go to kaifamily.com and watch Uyanas and Payitaht. Those are important shows because it shows us Imam al-Ghazali, Nizam al-Mulk, and the Batinis and all those people in their times. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us through these interesting times, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always give us people who think out of the box and people who can guide our communities. And a lot of times, remember, you cannot go through life without fighting back, without being people of integrity, people of courage, people of heart. The word heart and courage in the Latin actually has the same meaning. But especially we need to be people of piety and people of spirituality. And as we fear going into possible violence, people are closing up stores and Allah expecting some violence. Don't forget the Malaika are always there. The Malaika are there to protect you and to guide you. The story I've heard, and it's maybe useful to retell here. There was one gentleman for 40 years, he's been in Perth, Australia, and he's a very, very spiritual man. He also leads a spiritual group and reads the Quran, studies it all the time. One day, one of these rednecks came up to him and said something offensive, and for the first time, just simply because of his color, he said, okay, do it. If you want to hurt me, so just go ahead. The man gave him a punch. He lost his spectacles. But he said 2-3 minutes later, the man's teeth were out. He was bleeding all over his face, and he can't even recall throwing the punches. وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. You know what happened in Badr, where 5,000 Malaika helped the Muslims in Badr. Don't forget, you still have the power to tap into these sources. You tell your family to pray on time. You tell your family to do extra fast, to do good. The Malaika are still at your disposal. Go into it. Train your children to be fearless, to be cautious but fearless. But they also need to fight the good fight at times. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salam ala ibadillah alladhina astafa amma ba'd. Allahumma fasalli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad wa ashabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, khususan ala al-khulafai rashidin, Abi Bakr wa Umar wa Uthman wa Ali radiyallahu anhum wa ala sair as-sahaba wa tabi'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. Allahumma a'izz al-Islam wal muslimin. Allahumma a'izz al-Islam wal muslimin. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر المسلمين في كل مكان. اللهم انصرنا ولا تنصر علينا، وامكر لنا ولا تمكر علينا، واهدنا سبل السلام، وجنبنا الفواحش ما ظهر منا وما بطن. اللهم ادفع عنا البلاء والوباء والزنا والزلازل والمحن والسوء والفتن. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. Jama'atul Muslimin, just remember, if we cast our vote, whoever we cast the vote for, you still have the right to dissent. You still have the right to stand up for issues of justice, issues that you feel strongly about. Just simply because the person you voted for has a certain political and ideological point of view does not mean you must become less Muslim and less passionate about issues that concern us, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Kashmir, whether it's Xinjiang or Africa, etc. So that's one. It's important for us to study the process. The groups like the political action committees that we have, it's important that they start now already and study these candidates and just don't go by their words. My daughter is 22 years old. She was voting for the second time. And she spent hours upon hours studying every candidate on the ballot and saying, no, not here, not there. And so she went in knowing exactly what and who she wanted to vote for. Maybe the young people are going to show us the way. I've been asked to encourage the Juma'a to observe some of the rules. I feel it's maybe good to observe these rules inside the masajid because we have so many people who are enemies of Muslims who want to close down the masajid. And so it's good to follow some of these rules, even though a lot of these rules don't make sense to me. You go to the bars and there's no social distancing, and the masks don't make sense to me. It creates a lot more illnesses than it should be creating. I look at the hadith of the Rasul sallallahu la adwa wa la tiyara, and it's actually mentioned in the context of superstition. And the hadith of Umar bin Khattab, where he took people out of the ta'un, 25,000, to another clean area. That was because the terrain was dirty. So the terrain theory by homeopaths, that it's the terrain that is dirty that causes the virus, and not the germ theory, where the germ itself causes the virus. That's my opinion, and I don't want to enforce that opinion on anyone else. But there's also a hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Umarul Masajid, those who frequent the masajid, Allah protect them much more. Unless, of course, other people plan and they make Muslims targets of these viruses. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our masajid. We pray that we get back to the new normal where we can stand shoulder to shoulder, we can ta'anaqu, tasafahu, we can shake hands, we can hug each other, we can visit our elders, we can do wudu, we can do all the things that were normal in Islam. And that this new haram that's imposed on us, that an end will come to that. If the virus is just a epidemic, severe epidemic, we ask Allah to take away this severe epidemic, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect Islam, protect the Muslims. But just remember, because there are so many enemies of Islam out there, they want to close down the masajid, they want to keep open abortion clinics, they want to keep open the bars. But masajid, they want to close down, follow the rules just for that. I don't believe in much of it, but that's my opinion. I don't want to force that upon you, but I feel we have a right to express that opinion. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم ودعوه يستجيب لكم ولذكر الله تعالى أعلى وأولى وأعز وجل وأتم وأهم وأكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون أقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا